So in this video, let us see the top 10 amazing execution survival stories. Number 10, Elizabeth Proctor, 1652. In 1652, Elizabeth Proctor and her husband John were accused of witchcraft in the Salem witch trials. After their arrest, the court met to discuss the fate of John and Elizabeth and several others. In spite of the petitions and testimonials from friends, both John and Elizabeth were found guilty and sentenced to death. Elizabeth, who was pregnant at the time, was granted a stay of execution until after the birth of the baby. John tried to postpone his execution but failed. On August 19, 1692, he was executed. In January 1693, while still in prison, Elizabeth gave birth to a son. For some reason, Elizabeth was not executed as the court had ordered. And then in 1693, the governor, believing that the people were being wrongly convicted without hard evidence, ordered 153 people set free. Elizabeth was among this general release of prisoners. So this is the number 10 in amazing execution survival stories. Number 9, John Henry George Lee, 1864 says 1945. In 1884, at her home at England, Miss Emma Kise was bludgeoned to death with an axe, her throat slashed with a knife, and her house set on fire. John Lee, who was one of the servants at the house, was arrested and convicted of her murder and sentenced to death by hanging. The date for the hanging was set for February 23rd, 1885. At the Exeter prison, when Lee was standing at the gallows waiting to die, the trapdoor release malfunctioned. Not once, not twice, but three times. Amid the confusion of these botched attempts, Lee was returned to his cell and at some later time the Home Secretary reduced his sentence to life imprisonment with the recommendation he never be released. Number 8. Jolka Khadkhoda, born 1977. In 1997, in Iran, 20-year-old Jolka Khadkhoda was arrested and charged with engaging in sexual relations outside marriage. She was immediately sentenced to death by stoning. Khadkhoda was then buried up to her waist in preparation for her execution, but soon after the stoning began, it prompted a violent reaction among most of the village inhabitants, which caused the stoning to stop it. It was first thought the woman had died and she was taken to the morgue, but she began to breathe again and was taken to the hospital. Her condition improved and an appeal for amnesty was submitted to the court on her behalf. Number 7. John Smith. 1690. John Smith from England was convicted of robbery and was sentenced to death by hanging at Tyburn. On Christian Eve 1705, having been pushed off the of the cart, back of the cart, he dangled for 15 minutes until he crowd began to shout reprise. He was then cut down and taken to the Neddy house where he soon recovered. When Smith was asked what it had felt like to be hanged, to be hanged, this is what he told his rescuers. When I was turned off, I was for some time sensible of very great pain by the weight of my body and felt my spirits in strange commotion. Number 6. Anna Green, 1630. Anna Green was a 22-year-old woman from England who was most likely seduced by the grandson of her employer. When Green became pregnant, she hid her pregnancy and gave birth to a premature baby boy who died soon after he was born. After trying unsuccessfully to hide the child's body, Green was accused of the murder and sentenced to death by hanging. Number 5. William Duell, 1724. In 1740, 16-year-old William Duell was convinced of raping and murdering a girl in the village of Tyburn, London. Duell was sentenced to death by hanging along with 4 others. During this time period, bodies of criminals were regularly provided to medical training colleges. So after the execution, the body was brought to surgeons called to be anatomized. After he was stripped and laid on the board, one of the surgeons noticed he was breathing. After Dwell's breath became quicker and quicker, the surgeon took some blood from him, and in 2 hours he was able to sit up in his chair. That evening, the authorities decided to grant him a reprieve and reduced his sentence. Number 4. Wenceslao Mogul, 1880. On March 18, 1915, Wenceslao Mogul was captured while fighting in the Mexican Revolution. He was sentenced without trial execution by firing squad. Mogul was shot 9 times with the final bullet fired close range at his head. Number 3. Joseph Samuel, 1780. Joseph Samuel was born in England and later transported to Australia after committing a robbery in 1801. He became involved in a gang in Sydney and robbed the home of a wealthy woman. A policeman who was stationed at her home was murdered. The gang was soon caught and at the trial, Joseph Samuel confessed to stealing the goods but denied being part of the murder. Number 2. Maggie Dixon, 1700. Maggie Dixon lived in Edinburgh, Scotland in the early 18th century. Her story is remarkably similar to Anne Green's. After her husband deserted her in 1723, she was forced to move further south to Kelso near the Scottish borders. She worked for an innkeeper in return for basic lodgings and started an affair with the innkeeper's son, which led to her becoming pregnant. So the number one, Willie Francis, 1929 to 1947. In 1945, Willie Francis, age 16, was charged with the murder of a drugstore owner in Martinville, Louisiana. The murder went unsolved for 9 months until Francis was detained due to an unrelated crime. Police claimed he was carrying the wallet of the drugstore owner in his pocket. A short time later, Francis confessed to the murder. He later directed the police to where he had disposed of the holster used to carry the murder weapon. So these are the top 10